about these two technologies. Angular is one of the most popular JavaScript front-end framework for building a web applications. It uses TypeScript language to write the web application. Spring MVC is one of the most popular Java framework for building web applications, using which we can build industry standard Java enterprise applications. In this video series, we are going to take an advantage of these two technologies and we're going to build a complete web application. We're not going to build a simple hello world application, we're going to build a fully fledged database application. So what are we building in this video course? We're going to build a book management system. We're going to perform all the CRUD operations like creating a book, reading a book, updating a book and deleting a book. So how do we build this application? We're going to build this in two steps. In the first step, we're going to build a REST API, which is a book API. We're going to use a Spring MVC to build this book API. This book API is exposing 5 different service endpoints. If someone make a GET request to /API/book, this will return all the books in a JSON format. And if we make a GET request to /API/book/book ID, this will give the book object in a JSON format. And if we make a POST request to /API/book, this will create a book object in the database. And if we make a PUT request to /API/book/book ID, this will update the book object in a database. And if we make a delete request to /API/book/book ID, this will delete a book object from the database. In the second step, we're going to build Angular front-end application, and through that we're going to make a HTTP calls to these service endpoints. So this is the agenda for this course. Let's get started. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In this video, we will be creating a Maven project and we will add all the dependencies to our application, and we will create packages and we will set up our database. By the end of this video, we will be set up our application and we are ready to create an API. So let's get started. I'm using the Eclipse IDE for the development. You can use any other IDEs like Spring Toolsuite or IntelliJ IDEA or NetBeans IDE. So if you are using the Eclipse to create a Maven project, go to File, click on New and choose Maven project. Click on this Create a Simple Project, skip Archetype selection and click Next. Give a group ID com.Bhushan Sirigur. Artifact ID, I'm gonna call this book API. Click Finish. This will create a Maven project. This will take a few seconds to create an application, and once it is done, double click on the book API project and double click on the pom.xml. Inside the pom.xml, we will be adding all the dependencies. In interest of time, I have already copied all the dependencies to our clipboard, so I'll paste it inside the pom.xml. If you look at this pom.xml, there is nothing to XML because on above every dependency I have nicely commented out that why we are using that dependency. For example, this is for Spring dependency, and this is for Spring ORM, this is for Hibernate, and this is for C3P0 for connection pooling, and this is for MySQL connector. Like that, I have nicely commented out that why we are using that dependency. So by looking that comments, you can easily understand. There is nothing to explain in this pom.xml. Once you add the dependencies to this pom.xml, that's it. You're never going to touch this pom.xml ever again. So once you added the dependencies, save this, and you need to update the project. So right click on the project and go to the Maven and click on the update project and click OK. This will download all the dependencies that we have specified in this file. If you go to the properties of the project and if you go to the Java build path, and in the Maven dependencies, you can find all the dependencies that I have downloaded or the jar files that I have downloaded. And now let's create packages for our project. So inside the source main Java, right click, create a new package. We're going to create 5 packages. One is for configuration and one is for controller, and one is for DAO and model and service. So let's go ahead and create the packages. com.bhushan srigur.spring.config. This package holds the configuration for Spring and Hibernate. Click finish. Copy this and paste it, and I'm changing this to DAO instead of configuration, and I'll change this to controller, model, and service. Okay, now we have created 5 packages, and we have to create one more file, which is a property file. So inside the source main resources, create a file, choose other and filter for file, choose the file which is inside the general folder and click next, and give a file name db.properties, click finish. Alright, now we have to create a database for our API. I'm going to use a MySQL database for this API. You can use any other databases you want. So I'm going to use a MySQL workbench. So open a MySQL workbench. So inside this, I'm going to create a database, create database, and the database name, in this case it's book API. Execute the command and refresh the section. You can see the book API. So we have created this database. In order to use this database, or in order to select this database, you need to use command, use the database name. In this case it's a book API. Execute the command, the book API is selected. That's it. We are not going to create a database tables, because the database tables will be created by Hibernate. So we just create a database in this case. So minimize this. Alright, we have created the Maven project and created a packages, and also we created a property file. We also set up our database. So in the next video, we will start writing a code for our API. In the next video, inside the configuration package, we are going to create a few classes, and we will configure the Spring and Hibernate. We'll see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In the previous video, we have created a Maven project and we set up our database. In this video, we're going to configure the Spring and Hibernate. Before that, we need to fill this property file. The property file holds the MySQL properties like the driver name, URL, username, and password for the MySQL database, and it also holds the Hibernate properties and the connection pooling properties. You might have thinking that why we are using a connection pooling. Let me clear you. Whenever we are creating enterprise applications, interacting with the database is very common. So creating and establishing a database connection is very expensive, because we need to establish a network connection, initialize the database sessions, and we have to authorize the backend database. Due to this issue, it is always a good practice to use a connection pool in our application. So that will increase the performance and scalability of the application. By using a connection pool, we can reuse the already existing connections and prepare statements, so that will avoid the cost of establishing a connections. And C3P0 is just one of the library for connection pooling. You can use any other libraries like DBCP and any other available connection pooling libraries you can use. In this video series, we are going to use C3P0 connection pooling. Okay, enough talking, let's write the properties. So the first properties that we are going to write is a MySQL properties. I'll write a comment so that you can refer it later. MySQL properties. So the first property is mysql.driver. You have to specify the driver name, com.mysql.cj.jdbc.driver. Make sure the D is capital. If you are using any other database, then you have to find the respective driver name on the internet and write it here. The second property is mysql.url, jdbc mysql /localhost 3306 / the database name. In the previous video we have created a database which is a book API, and the third property is mysql.user, and we have to write the username for the database. In this case it's root. If you have given any other names, then write it here. mysql.password. I have not set any password to my MySQL database, so I left this option as blank. If you set any password, then write it here. The next properties that we are going to write is Hibernate properties. Hibernate dot show SQL. I'll set this to true. So this will show all the SQL queries in the console when we run an application. You can also set this to false, so that will not show any SQL queries in the console. Hibernate dot HBM to DDL dot auto. I'll set this to update. You can also set this to create. If you set a create, every time when you run the application, all the database tables will be deleted and it will recreate. So if you use update, so it won't delete any database tables, it will just update the database tables. So it's always recommended to use update. The next properties that we're going to write is connection pool properties, which is a C3P0 properties. Hibernate dot C3P0 dot minimum size of the connection pool is 5. I'll copy this and I'll paste it, and I'll change this to maximum size, which is 20. Copy this and I'll paste it. The third property is acquire increment. This will tells the number of connections acquired when the pool is exhausted. I'll change this to 1. Copy this and I'll paste it. The fourth property is a timeout. I'll set this to 1800, which is a seconds. Fifth property is Hibernate dot C3P0 dot maximum statements. In this case it's 150. Alright, we have written all the properties in the property file. In the next video we're going to configure and Spring and Hibernate, and we're going to read this property file and we will make use of these properties in the configuration. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In the previous video, we have written the properties, and in this video, we are going to configure Spring and Hibernate. So let's get started. There are two ways to configure Spring and Hibernate. One is XML configuration and second one is Java configuration. The XML configuration is a traditional way of configuring Spring and Hibernate. We will create an XML file and we will create a bunch of bean tags and we will configure Spring and Hibernate. But now people are using a Java configuration because it is a way simpler than XML configuration. We don't have to write too much of code in Java configuration. We just have to use annotations. So in this video series, we are going to use Java configuration instead of XML configuration. But if you are looking for an XML configuration, under this video in the description section, I'll provide a link to the XML configuration link as well. You can go ahead and check out the XML configuration as well. So for now, let's concentrate on Java configuration. So inside the configuration package, we're going to create 3 classes. Let's create one by one. So the first class that we're going to create is app config. So right click on the package and choose new and select the class. I'm going to call this app config. Click finish. I'm going to annotate this with add configuration. We have to tell Spring container that this is a configuration file. Add configuration. And we have to tell Spring container that where the property file is located. I'm going to use add property source. And we have to tell where the property file is located. In our case, the property file is located in the class path. Class path : db.properties, which is our property file name. And I'm going to enable the transaction management. At enable transaction management. And we have to tell Spring container that which are all the packages we need to scan. If we need to scan more than one packages, then we have to use add component scans. Value. This will take an array. So inside the curly braces, add component scan. Anytime if you want to scan one package, then you need to use add component scan. Within the parenthesis, com.bhushan sirigur.spring.dao, and we need to scan service package as well. So I'm going to copy this and I'll change this to service. Alright, we have annotated this with the add configuration. This will tell Spring container that this is a configuration file. Add property source. We need to tell Spring container that where the property file is located. Add enable transaction management. We have to enable the transaction. Add component scans. We have to tell Spring container that which are all the packages we need to scan. Inside the app config, we are going to create two beans. One is local session factory bean and another one is Hibernate transaction manager. Inside the local session factory bean, we will read the properties from the property file and we will set the properties to the local session factory bean and we will return the local session factory bean. In the Hibernate transaction manager, we are going to set the session factory. So let's create those two beans. I'm going to create some white space. Public local session factory bean, which is a return type. I'm going to call this get session factory. I'm going to annotate this with add bean. Make sure this local session factory bean, which is from Hibernate 5. If you imported from Hibernate 3, then Eclipse will show that the method has been deprecated. So change this to Hibernate 5 because we are using a Hibernate 5. Inside this, I'm going to create a local session factory bean object. Local session factory bean, I'm going to call this factory bean. And I'm going to create a properties object, which is from java.util package. I'm going to call this props. I'll write a comments that we are setting the JDBC properties. Props.put. This will take two arguments. One is name and value. The value we are going to read from the property file. So to read a property file, we need an environment variable. Up above, I'm going to create a private variable, which is of type environment, which is from the org.springframework.core.env. I'm going to call this env, and I'm not going to create an object for this. I will auto wire this environment so that the Spring container will create an object for us at auto wired. Now env.getProperty, and before that we have to set a key, the key which is driver. So we need to import one more statement, which is import static org.hibernate.cfg.environment.star. This will give us the driver for us, and we have to read from the property file within the double quotes. I'll copy this mysql.driver. Don't write it, just copy and paste it. I'll copy this line and I'll paste it. Now we have to set we're going to create some white space. I'll set the Hibernate properties. Setting Hibernate properties. Now we are going to set the C3P0 properties, which is a connection pooling properties. Setting C3P0 properties. Now we have to set these properties to the factory bean. Factory bean dot set Hibernate properties, and I'll pass the props. And next, factory bean dot set packages. As I said before, the tables will be created by Hibernate, so we have to tell Hibernate that which is the package that has to scan. In this case, com.bhushan.spring.model. So the model package will hold the model classes. So by scanning those model package classes, the Hibernate will create a tables for us. So finally, we are going to return factory bean. And I'll remove these white spaces. Now we have to create one more bean, which is a Hibernate transaction manager. Public Hibernate transaction manager get. I'm going to call this get transaction manager. As I said before, this is importing from the Hibernate 3, so we have to change this to Hibernate 5. I'm going to annotate this with add bean. Inside this, I'm going to create an object for Hibernate transaction manager. Hibernate transaction manager. I'm going to call this transaction manager. Transaction manager dot set the session factory. I'll call the get session factory that we have created above, and I'm going to call get object method. And finally, we are going to return transaction manager. That's it. This is all about the app config file. So inside the app config, we have created two beans, which is a local session factory bean and Hibernate transaction manager. Inside the local session factory bean, we have read the properties from the property file, and we set that properties to the local session factory bean, and we will return the factory bean or the local session factory bean. And inside the Hibernate transaction manager, we have set the session factory, and we will return the transaction manager, which is Hibernate transaction manager. But we have not yet done the configuration. We have configured only one class. We have to create two more classes that we are going to do in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In the previous video, we have created an app config file, and we have read the properties from the property file, and we have created two beans. In this video, we are going to create two other classes. So let's get started. The next class that we are going to create is web config. In the configuration package, right click, go to new, and click on class, and I'm going to call this web config, and click finish. And I'm going to annotate this class with the add configuration because we need to tell Spring Container that this is a configuration file, add configuration. And we need to tell Spring Container that we are using a Web MVC. So I'll use add enable Web MVC. And we need to tell Spring Container that where the controller classes are located. So we need to use add component scan. We have to specify the base packages. com.bhushan sirigur.spring.controller. And this web config extends a special class called Web MVC configurer adapter. So let's extend this. Extends Web MVC configurer adapter. If we don't extend this class with a Web MVC configurer adapter, then we are not able to achieve the Web MVC. We have to tell Spring Container that we are extending a Web MVC configurer adapter. It's a predefined class that the Spring people has provided. That's it. That's all about this web config file. Let's save this. Let's create last and final class for our Spring and Hibernate configuration. Right click on the package, go to new and choose class. I'm going to call this my web app initializer. We have to extend this class with the abstract annotation config dispatcher servlet initializer. Yes, that's a pretty big name, but we have to extend this because the Spring people has provided that special class in order to configure Spring and Hibernate. Extends abstract annotation configuration dispatcher servlet initializer. And we have to override 3 methods in this class. One is a get root config classes, second one is get servlet config classes, and the get servlet mappings. I'm going to implement those methods and I'll remove these comments. Alright, first let's write a code for get root config classes. We have to tell Spring Container that which is a root configuration classes. In this case, the root configuration classes is app config, and the get servlet configuration classes, which is a web config. Let's go ahead and write a code for that. Return new class, it's an array, app config dot class, return new class, it's an array as well, inside the curly braces, web config dot class, return new string within the curly braces within a double quotes slash. So this ends our Spring and Hibernate configuration. The my web app initializer extends abstract annotation config dispatcher servlet initializer. We have to override 3 methods: get root configuration classes, which is a app config, and get servlet configuration classes, which is a web config, and get servlet mappings, which is a slash. And the web config will extend the Web MVC configurer adapter. We have to tell Spring Container that we are using a MVC architecture, and the app config will read the properties from the property file. That's all about the configuration of Spring and Hibernate. Don't worry too much about this configuration. If you don't understand, don't worry, because nothing to do with this configuration. It's a one-time configuration. So once you have done the configuration, and for every application the same configuration applies. So just go ahead and write these configurations, and that's it. And you're never going to touch these configuration files again. We are only concentrating on controller, DAO, model, and services. That's all about this Spring and Hibernate configuration. In the next video, we are going to create a controller, DAO, model, and service classes. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In the previous 2 videos, we have covered the configuration of Spring and Hibernate. In this video, we're going to create our very first model class. So let's get started. Inside the model package, right click, create a class. I'm going to call this book and click finish. I'm going to annotate this with @entity. The Hibernate looks for the @entity and it will create a table with the name book. Let's import this, which is from javax.persistence. Inside this, I'm going to create three properties: ID, title, and author. Private long ID, private string title, private string author. I'm going to annotate this with ID. With the @ID annotation, we have to tell Hibernate that this is a primary key. I'm going to annotate this with a generated value. Strategy is equal to generation type dot identity, and I'm going to create a setters and getters for this. Select all, click OK, and I'm going to override toString method as well. Alright, we have created our very first model class. We have to annotate this class with the @entity, and we have specified the name as book. So the Hibernate looks for the @entity annotation, and the Hibernate will create a table for us with the name book. And ID, title, author are the columns for the book table, and our ID will be a primary key, which is auto increment. That's all about this video. In the next video, we are going to create interface and class for our DAO. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In the previous video, we have created a model class. In this video, we'll create our DAO class. Before that, let's verify whether the Hibernate is creating a table for us or not. I'm going to run the application now. Before that, let me close all the files. Right click on the project, choose run as. First, let's clean the project. I'm going to select Maven clean. Let me expand the console that you can see. Build success. Right click on the project, run as, Maven build. I'll set the goals as package, click run. The project is getting built. You can see that the build is success, and refresh the project. Inside the target folder, you can see the war file, which is book API war file. Now right click on the project and choose run as, run on server. Click next, click finish. In the console, you can see the message that the table is creating, because in the property file we set the show SQL is equal to true, so that we can see that the table is creating in the console. Creating a book table, which is ID, author, title. Alright, let me close this. Go to the MySQL database and refresh. You can see the table has been created with the name book. And if you expand the table, click on the columns, you can see there are three columns are there: ID, author, title. If you click on this ID, you can see it's an auto increment and it's a primary key, which means the Hibernate is creating a table for us. Let me clear the console. Now let's create a DAO class and the interface for our application. Let me minimize this. I'll open the Java resources, and inside the DAO package, I'm going to create interface. I'm going to call this book DAO. click finish. I'll write some comments, save the record, long save. To this method we will pass a book object. Let me import the book, which is from bhushansirgu.spring.model, and the second method is for get a single record. Book get, we will pass an ID to this method, and the third method get all the records. This will return a list which is of type book. I'm gonna call this list. Let me import list, which is from java.util, and the fourth method update the record. I'm gonna call this update. To this we will pass an ID and a book object, and the last method is delete a record. I'm gonna call this delete, and to this method we will pass an ID of the book. Alright, we have created an interface for our DAO. Now let's create a class inside the DAO package. I'm gonna create a class. I'm gonna call this book DAO implementation. Click finish. I'm going to implement book DAO, which we have created just now. I'm going to implement all the methods. Just to test the application, first let's write a code for list method. Up above, I'm going to create a session factory object, private session factory. I'm gonna call this session factory. I'm not going to create an object for this. I'll tell Spring Container to create an object for session factory. So I will auto wire this at auto wire. Inside the list method, I will make use of session factory. Session factory dot get the current session dot create a query. Within the double quotes, I will write a SQL query from book, and this will give us a list. I'm going to call list method, and this will return list of books which are available in the database. I'll import the list. I'm going to call this list, and finally we are going to return the list back to the service method. Alright, we have written a code for list method. In the next video, we're going to create a service interface and the service implementation class, and we're going to call this list method from the service class, and we will hand over it to controller. That is coming up in the next video. I'm going to stop the server before that, and I'll save this file. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In the previous video, we have created a book DAO and the book DAO implementation, and we have forgot to annotate this implementation class with the add repository. So let's annotate this. Alright, in this video, we're going to create a service interface and the service implementation class. Let's save this. I'm going to close. Alright, let me keep this. Inside the service package, I'm going to create a interface. I'm going to call this book service. Inside this, I'll copy all the methods which are there in the DAO and I'll paste it inside the service interface. And I'm going to create a implementation class. I'm going to call this book service implementation. Click finish. I'm going to implement with a book service that we have created just now. And I'm going to implement all the methods. For now, let's concentrate on the list method. I'm going to remove this. Up above, I'm going to create a DAO object, private book DAO. I'm going to import this. I'm going to call this book DAO. I'm not going to create an object for this book DAO. I'll tell Spring Container to create an object for us. I'm going to annotate this with the auto wired. Inside the list method, I'll make use of book DAO and I'm call the DAO method, which is a list method, and I'm going to return it to the controller. Make sure we have to annotate this method with the add transactional. Up above, we have to annotate this service implementation class with the add service annotation. Alright, save this. That's it for this video. In this video, we have created a book service interface and the book service implementation classes, and we have implement all the methods, and we have get the list of records from the DAO, and we are returning it to the controller. In the next video, we will create a controller class and we will call the service method and we will test our application. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In the previous video, we have created a service interface and the service implementation class. In this video, we will create a controller class and let's call the service method. Inside the controller package, let's create a class. I'm going to call this book controller. I'm going to annotate this class with a @REST controller because we are creating a REST API. Inside this, I'm going to create a service object, private book service. I'm going to call this book service. I'm not going to create an object for this book service. I'll tell Spring Container to create an object for us. I'm going to annotate this with the auto wired. Let me write a comments. Get all the books. Public response entity I'm gonna call this list. Let me import the list, which is from java.util package, and the book, which is from spring.model. Inside this, I'm going to call a service method, book service.list. I'm going to call this list, return response entity .ok .body. To this body, we will pass the list of books. If you are working in a real-time applications, the response entity should not be our return type. We will create our custom class and we will add our custom properties like response code, response message, and the response object. But for now, let's keep it simple. Let's use response entity as our return type. I'm going to annotate this method with the @getMapping because this is a HTTP GET request, get mapping, and the mapping would be /API/book. Alright, we have written a method for get list of books. Now it's time to test our application. Before that, we need to add a few records to our database. In interest of time, I have already 3 records to our database or to our table. Now let's execute the command, which is select star from book. You can see the records that are there in the table. In order to test our API, we need a REST client. I have already downloaded the Postman. If you don't have Postman, then go to Google and search for Postman REST client, and you can see the first link, which is from Chrome Web Store. Click on this and download the Postman. I have already downloaded, so it is showing as a launch app. So I launch the Postman, and here we will test our API. So before that, I'm going to run the project. Right click, choose run as, run on server. It is asking me to save the book controller file. Save this, click next, click finish. This will open in a browser. So copy the URL and go to Postman and paste that URL. In this case, API/books or book. Let me minimize and let me verify this. Alright, it's API/book. Copy this and I'll paste it. It's a GET request, so click on the send. You can see all the records which are there in the database. 3 mistakes of my life, 2 states, I too had a love story. Let's verify in the database. 3 mistakes of my life, 2 states, I too had a love story. In the console, you can see that the SQL query is executing. So finally, our application is up and running. So in the next video, we're going to write rest of the methods and we will complete this API. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In the previous video, we have created a controller class and we tested our API. In this video, let's complete the save method. I'll open the book DAO implementation and I'll remove these comments. I'll make use of session factory to save the book object. Session factory.get current session.save. To this save method, we will pass the book object. And I'm going to return the book ID. Return book.getID. And I'll open the book service implementation and I'll remove these comments as well. I'm going to call the DAO method and return it back to the controller. Return book DAO dot save. To this save method, we will pass book object. And I'm going to annotate this with a @transactional. And I'll go to the book controller. Let me create some white space. I'll write a comments. Save the book. Public response entity. And I'm gonna call this save. This will take book and we have to annotate this with a @request body. Inside this, I will call the service method. Book service dot save. To this save method, we will pass the book object, and this will give us the book ID. I'm gonna call this ID, and I'm going to return that ID. Return response entity dot OK dot body. Inside the body, I will write a message. Book created with ID, and I'll concatenate the ID to this message. And I'm going to annotate this method with a @post mapping because this is a HTTP post request. Post mapping and the request mapping should be /API/book. Save all the files and stop the server and restart the application. Alright, our application is up and running. I will open the Postman and I'll open a new tab and I'll copy the same URL and I'll paste it here and I'll change this to post, and inside the body I'll change this to raw and I'll change this to JSON because we are sending a JSON data. So within the curly braces, within the double quotes, title, the title of the book is Director Special, author Guru Prasad. Click on the send button. You can see the message that book created with ID 4. Let's verify this with the database. And I'm going to execute this command. You can see that the new book has been created, Director Special. Let's verify this with the Postman, and I'm going to click the send button. This time you can see the 4 records, which is Director Special, which is our 4th record. Alright, we have completed the save method. In the next video, we'll look at the other operations as well. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. In the previous video, we have discussed about the save method. In this video, we'll write a code for getting a single record. I'll open the book DAO implementation and I'll remove these comments. I'll make use of session factory, get the current session dot get. This will take 2 arguments. One is a class name, in this case book dot class, and the second parameter, which is a book ID. And I'm going to return this back to the service method. I'll go to the service implementation and I'll remove these comments. I'm going to call the DAO method bookDAO.get, and I will pass the book ID, and I'm going to return back to the controller. And I'll go back to the controller. I'll write a comments, get a single record, public response entity. I'm gonna call this get. This will take ID as an argument, and I'm going to annotate this method with the @get mapping because this is a HTTP GET request, and the request mapping should be /API/book/ within the curly braces we will pass the ID, which is a book ID, and inside this parenthesis we have to annotate this with the @path variable. And we have to specify the same name that we have specified in the URL. Copy this and paste it inside the method. I'm going to call a book service. I'm going to call a get method, and I will pass ID to this get method, and this will give us the book object, and I'm going to return that book. Return response entity .ok.body. To this body we will pass the book object, the path variable which accepts the ID which is coming from the URL, and go to the book service implementation and annotate this method with the @transactional. Save all the files and restart the server. Alright, our application is up and running. I will open the Postman. I'll open a new tab and I'll copy the URL and I'll paste it, and I'll change this to get, and I'll pass the book ID. I'll pass the ID 1, and when I click the send button, you can see the book record which is having a ID 1. Change this to 2, you can expect the record which is having a ID 2. This is about the getting a single record from the database. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. In the next video, we will look at the update and delete operations. I will see you in the next video. Welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In this video, we'll update the record. I'll go to the book DAO implementation. Inside the update method, I will make use of session factory. I'm going to call a get current session, and I'm going to store this in a session. I'm going to call this session dot by ID. To this by ID, we will pass the book class. On this, we will call the load method. To this load method, I will pass the book ID. This will give us the book object. I'm going to call this old book. To this old book, we have to set the title and author which is coming from this book. So, old book dot set title. I'm going to call the get title method. And I'm going to set the author, and I'll call the get author method, and I will call flush method on this session object, session dot flush, and inside the service implementation, I will call the DAO method book DAO dot update. To this update method, we will pass the book ID and the book object, and I'm going to annotate this with the @transactional, and inside the book controller, I'll write a comments update the book record public response entity. I'm going to call this update. This will take 2 parameters, ID and the book object. And I'm going to annotate this method with the @put mapping, because this is we are going to make a HTTP put request, and the request mapping should be /API/book/ within the curly braces we will pass the book ID, and inside this parenthesis I'm going to annotate this with the @path variable. We have to specify the same name that we have specified in the URL, and the second parameter, which is book, I'm going to annotate this with @request body. Inside the method, I'm going to call the service method book service dot update. To this update method, we will pass the book ID and the book object. And I'm going to return the response entity dot OK dot body. To this body, I will write a message: book has been updated. Save all the files and right click on the project or restart the server. Once the server is restarted, open the Postman and open a new tab. I'm going to copy the URL and I'll paste it, and I'll change this to put request. Inside the body, I'll select the raw and I'll change this to JSON. I'll copy the JSON data and I'll paste it, and I'll remove the ID and I'll change this to Chetan instead of Chetan Bhagat. And when I click the send button, you can see the message: that the book has been updated. Let's verify this. I'm going to click the send button. You can see the book ID, which is 2, which is having an author name Chetan. Before it was Chetan Bhagat. So this is about updating a record. In the next video, we're going to discuss the last operation, which is deleting a record. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In this video, we'll discuss the last operation, which is deleting a record. Inside the book.do implementation, I'll remove these comments. Let me create some white space. Inside the delete method, I will make use of session factory. Session factory.get the current session. I'm going to store this in a session. I'm going to call this session by id. To this by id, we will pass the book class. On this, I will call load method. To this load method, we will pass the book id. This will give us the book object. Session.delete. To this delete method, we will pass the book object. Let me remove these white spaces. And inside the service implementation, I'll remove these comments. Inside the delete method, we will call the DAO method, book.do.delete. To this delete method, we will pass the book ID. And I'm going to annotate this with @transactional. Inside the book controller, I'll write a comment. Delete a book record. Public response entity. I'm going to call this delete. This will take ID as a parameter. And I'm going to annotate this with delete mapping, because we are going to make a HTTP delete request. And the request mapping should be /API/book/ within the curly braces, we will pass the book ID. And I'm going to annotate this parameter with a path variable, and we have to specify the same name that we have specified in the URL. Inside this, I will call the service method book service.delete. To this delete method, we will pass the book ID. And I'm going to return the response entity .ok.body. To this body, I will write a message. Book has been deleted. Save all the files and right click on the server, restart the server. Once the server is restarted, open the Postman and open a new tab and copy the URL and paste it and change this to delete request. Click the send button. You can see the message that book has been deleted. Let's verify this. I'm going to make a get request. You can see that the record has been deleted. So this is about deleting a record. Let me remove these white spaces. So far we have created all the methods and we have performed all the CRUD operations to this REST API. In the next video, we are going to test one more time this complete REST API and we will wrap up our course. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to our full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. Let's go ahead and create Angular project. Before creating an Angular project, we need a couple of tools. Yes, in order to work with Angular, we need Node.js. To check whether the Node.js is installed on your machine or not, go to the command prompt and run a command node -v. If you see a number like this, then you are already installed Node.js on your machine. If you don't see a number like this, and if you are command prompting like the command is not available, then you need to install Node.js. In order to download Node.js, go to this website, which is nodejs.org. The link will be given in the description section, and go to the download section and download the latest version that compatible with your operating system. Once you downloaded the Node.js, just go ahead and install. The installation is pretty straightforward. Just double click on the program and click next, and you are good to go. Once you install the Node.js, again go to the command prompt and run the same command. This time you will see this number. Again, if you don't see this number, again your command prompt is prompting like the command is not available, then something went wrong. Go ahead and uninstall the program and install it one more time. This time it will work for sure. Once you install the Node.js, the next thing we need to install a text editor. You can use any text editor you want. It's not compulsory to use text editor only. You can use IDE as well. If you are using a WebStorm or if you are using a PHP Storm, you can use that as well. But I'm very comfortable with Visual Studio Code, so throughout this section I'm using Visual Studio Code. So once you installed your favorite text editor, the next thing we need to install Angular CLI globally on our machine. So to install Angular CLI, go to the Angular website. You can see the documentation, angular.io/guide/quickstart. Here you can see the commands that you want to execute. So the first step, we need to install Angular CLI globally on our machine. To install Angular CLI, go to command prompt and type npm install -g, which indicates globally, at angular/CLI, and press enter. This will install Angular CLI globally on your machine. I'm not going to run this command because I have already installed CLI on my machine, so I'm not going to run this command. Once you execute this command, this will take a few minutes to install the Angular CLI. Once you install the Angular CLI, open your text editor. In this case, I'm using a Visual Studio Code. If you're using any other text editors, that is fine. So if you're using a Visual Studio Code, then press Ctrl tilde symbol, which is just below the escape key. This will open a built-in terminal in your Visual Studio Code. So right now I have created a project I have created a folder in D drive, which is a YouTube recording. Inside this, we are going to create a Angular project. So the next step is we need to create an Angular project. So to create a new Angular project, type this command ng new, and which is your project name, in this case book API. And when you execute this command, this is going to download the Angular project or a skeleton for us. This will take for a while. Once you created the project, you can see that the folder has been created in your workspace. And next, let's go ahead and run our application. To run an Angular application, type ng serve --open and press enter. This is going to open an application in a default web browser. Alright, I'm outside of the project directory, so we are getting this exception, or we are getting this error message. So what you need to do is you just have to go into the book API folder, cd book API, and now we are inside the book API. Now execute the command ng serve --open. This is going to open in a default web browser. If the application is not open in your web browser, you can go to the web browser and you can navigate to the localhost 4200. You can see the welcome page of our application. This is created by Angular. So now our application is up and running. So in the next video, we will start developing our book API. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In the previous video, we have created an Angular project and we tested our application. In this video, we will start writing a code for our book API. So let's get started. I'm not going to cover the structure of Angular project because this video series is not for learning the Angular basics. Instead, we will completely concentrate on how to make HTTP calls and how to use the service endpoints that we have exposed in Spring MVC. So let's go ahead and create a folder inside the app, which is in the source folder. So I'm going to call this, it's not a file, it's a folder. I'm going to call this book. This book folder holds 5 files. One is book.ts, which is a model class. We will create a book class and we will write the properties that are required for the book API. And the second file that we're going to create is a book.component.ts, which is something like a controller class. And the third file, which is a book.service.ts, which holds the business logic. Inside the service.ts, we will make a HTTP calls to our service endpoints. And the fourth file is book.component.html, which holds the UI part. And the fifth file is book.component.css, which is optional. If you want to design your application, then you can create our CSS file as well. So let's go ahead and create those 5 files inside this book folder. So inside the book.ts, I'm going to create a model class, export class. I'm going to call this book. Inside this, I'm going to define 3 properties: ID, which is a string, title, which is also a string, and author, which is also a string. And inside the book.component.ts, I'm going to create a class. I'm going to call this book component. Before that, we need to import few classes from Angular core library. So let's import those classes first. Import. I'm going to import this from Angular core at Angular/core. We're going to import component class and we're going to import onInit as well. onInit is a Angular lifecycle method. We're going to use this method later in our application. And I'm going to import the book class as well. Import. I'm going to import from this path, which is a ./book. We're going to import the book class. Make sure to save this file. And I'm going to create a class with the name book component. Export class book component. And I'm going to annotate this with a at component. We have to tell Angular that this class is a component. At component. This will take 3 attributes. First is a selector. You can give any name to your selector. I'm going to call this app book. The second attribute is template URL. You have to specify which is your UI part or which is your HTML file. Template URL. You have to specify the path that the HTML file is located. ./book.component.html. And the third attribute is style URLs. ./book.component.css. If you have a multiple CSS files, then you need to separate with a comma. Let's save this. Inside the book.html, I'll create a h1 tag and I'll write a message: welcome to book API. Save this. Now we are going to use this selector inside the app.component.html. So inside the app.component.html, we have some code. I'm going to remove this. This is created by Angular at the beginning. If you see this in the browser, if you see the welcome page, this code is in the app.component.html. So I'm going to remove this and I'm going to use that selector that we have created in the book.component.ts and save this and go to the browser. It is automatically reloading. Here we are expecting the message welcome to book API, but this is not displaying anything. Let's investigate by pressing F12. This will open the developer tools, and in the console you can see that app book is not a known element. Yes, this is obvious because we have created a component and we have defined the selector, but we haven't tell Angular that we are using this selector. We need to tell Angular, or we need to register our book component with the Angular module or the root module. In this case, the root module is app.module.ts. Let's go to that app.module.ts and let's import the book component. Import book component. We have to specify the path that where the book component is located, ./book/book component. And inside the declarations we have to specify the class name, which is book component, and save this. Now if you go to the browser, you can expect welcome to book API. Now we are able to see our message. Excellent. Let's see what we have done so far. So inside the app folder we have created one more folder for our API. I'm going to call this book. Inside the book folder we have created 5 files. One is book.component.css, book.component.html, book.component.ts, book.service.ts, and the book.ts. Inside the book.ts we will create a model class, and we have defined 3 properties, which is ID, title, author. And inside the book.component.ts we have created a class, and we have annotated this with the add component. We have to tell Angular that this class is a component class, and we have specified the 3 attributes: selector, template URL, style URLs. The selector, which is a app-book, you can give any name you want, and the template URL we have to tell Angular, or we have to tell this component that where is the UI is located. And the style URLs, if you want to specify the CSS files, you can specify with a comma separated. We have created a book.component.html. Inside this we will write our message, and inside the app.module.ts, which is our root module, we are declaring our book component, and we are telling Angular that we are going to use this book component as a component. So with all the changes, when we reload our web page, we will get the message welcome to book API. That's it for this video. In the next video we are going to design this book.component.html by creating a HTML table, and we will display the records by making a HTTP call. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In the previous video we have created a component class and a model class. In this video we are going to make a HTTP GET request. So inside the service.ts I'm going to create a class. I'm going to call this book service. Export class. I'm going to call this book service. Inside this I'm going to provide a constructor. Within the parentheses I'll provide a private variable. I'm going to call this HTTP service, which is of type HTTP. This is nothing but a dependency injection. We are not going to create an object for this HTTP. Instead we are going to tell Angular injector to inject the dependency. So before that I need to import the HTTP class from the Angular HTTP module. Import at Angular/HTTP. And I'm going to annotate this class with a @injectable. In Spring MVC we are going to call this annotations, but here in Angular we are going to call this decorators. Inside this I'm going to write a method to get all the books. I'm going to call this get all books. This will return a list of books. I'm going to call this observable, which is a list of books. I'm going to import the book as well. Import book at, it's not at, dot slash book. And I'm going to make use of this HTTP service. Before that, I'm going to import few libraries. Import rxjs / add / operator / map. I'm going to import the catch as well, and I'm going to import the response, request options, headers. Inside the get all books, before that I need to write a private method to handle the errors. Private, I'm going to call this handle error. I will pass the response object. I'm going to call this error. I'm going to return that error message to the observable. Observable dot throw. I'm going to throw that error inside the get all books. I will make use of this HTTP service. This dot HTTP service. I'm going to call get method. Inside the get method, we will provide our service endpoint. I have already copied the service endpoint. This will return a list of books in a JSON format. On this, I'm going to call map method. This will return a list of records. I'm going to call this response. Response, I will get the response. I'm going to call a JSON method on this response object. Response dot JSON, and I'm going to call the catch method. If something went wrong, we're going to catch that handle. I'm going to call that handle error, which is our private method, and I'm going to return this method. Alright, we have returned a method get all books. Inside this, we are making a HTTP get request. Now we need to register this book service inside our app.module.ts. We have to tell Angular that who is our provider. In this case, the provider is book service, and we need to import the HTTP module as well. So inside the imports, import the HTTP module and save this, and save the book.service.ts as well. In the next video, we are going to call this service method from our book.component.ts, and we are going to display the records in a console. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In the previous video, we have created a service class and we make a HTTP get request. In this video, we are going to call that service method from our component class. So inside the book component, we provide a constructor. Within the parenthesis, I'll create a private variable. I'm going to call this book service, which is of type book service. Again, this is a dependency injection. We are not going to create a book service object. Instead, the Angular injector will inject the dependency and initialize this book service variable. And I'm going to create a variable called books to hold the list of books, which is of type book. It's an array, and I'm going to create a method. I'm going to call this get books, which is of type void. Inside this, I will make use of this book service, this dot book service, and I'm going to call a service method which is a get all books. Get all books will not return a list of books until and unless we are subscribed to this method. So on this, I'm going to call a subscribe method, and this will gives us the list of books. I'm going to call this book data, and I'm going to assign this book data to this list of books. This dot books is equal to book data. When we call this get all books method, if we get an error response, then we are going to log that error response to the console. Error I'm going to log that error response to the console. Console.log, and I'll pass this error. To check whether we are getting a list of books or not, I'll provide a console.log console.log, and I'll print the book data. And I'm going to implement this class with a onInit interface. Implements onInit, and I'm going to override a special method called onInit. And inside this, I'm going to call this getBooks method. This dot getBooks. Save this, and in the browser, and you can see the welcome to book API a message. And if you open the console, we are getting an exception that no access control allow origin header is not present on the request response or the resource, which means the Angular is complaining that we are not able to make a HTTP GET request to this endpoint. This is because we have not enabled the cross origin in our Spring MVC API. To enable the cross origin in our book controller, just above your at rest controller, we have to annotate this with a cross origin. Save this and stop the server. This cross origin is used to enable the cross origin requests, because we are accessing these service endpoints from our Angular front-end server, so we have to enable this cross origin to provide the services. Just annotate this class with the @cross origin and stop the server and rerun the application. Once the server is restarted, open the browser and reload the web page. In the console, you can expect the list of records. If you expand this, you can see the records which are there in the database. 3 mistakes of my life, I too had a love story, director special. So in the next video, we're going to display these records in a HTML table. We're going to write a HTML table inside the book.component.html. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. In the previous video, we have called the service method and display the records in a console. In this video, we're going to display the records in a HTML table. Inside the book.component.html, just below the heading tag, I'll create a div tag. Inside the div, I will create a HTML table. I'm going to create a row, and I'm going to create 4 columns. The first column is for ID, and the second column is for title, and the third column is for author, and the fourth column is for actions. And I'm going to create one more row. Inside this, we'll create a table descriptions. Inside the book.component.ts, we have created this books variable, and here we are initializing that books. So I'm going to use this books in this component.html, and I'm going to use a ng for loop to iterate over the books. So inside the tr or the table row, I will use ng for loop star ng for, and I'm going to use let keyword to create a variable let book of books. This books is coming from book.component.ts, which is this. The ng for loop will iterate over these list of books, and every time when it is loop over this list of books, it will keep it in this book variable, and we're going to access the properties which is id, title, author through this variable. So I'm going to use Angular data binding within the two curly braces. I'm going to use book.id to access the id. I'm going to use book.title to access the title. I'm going to use book.author to access the author. Right now I'm not going to write a code for edit and delete. I will just write a text, edit and delete. Later we will make use of these edit and delete. I'm going to specify a border to this table. Border is equal to 1. Save this. In the browser you can expect the HTML table with the records. So these are the records we are getting from database. In the database you can see that we have these 3 records: Chetan Bhagat, Ravinder Singh, Guru Prasad. So the ng for loop will iterate over these list of books, and every time when it is iterate, it will keep the book object in this variable, and we are going to access the id, title, author through this variable. In the next video we are going to make a HTTP post request. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. In this video, we're going to make a HTTP post request. So inside the book.service.ts, I'm going to write a method. I'm going to call this add book. To this add book, we're going to pass the book object. I'm going to call this book, which is of type book. Inside this, I will create a variable. I'm going to use let keyword, let body is equal to, I'm going to convert this into a JSON object. So I'm going to use the stringify method, JSON.stringify, and I will pass the book object. And I'm going to create one more variable. I'm going to call this headers. I'm going to create a new header object. To this headers, we're going to pass the content type, which is application/JSON. Content type, which is application/JSON. I'm going to create one more variable, which is options. I'm going to create an object, which is request options. To this request options, we will pass the headers. I'm going to call this headers, and I will assign the headers. And I'm going to call the HTTP post method. I will make use of this HTTP service, this dot HTTP service dot post. To this post method, we will pass our service endpoint. I have already copied in the notepad, so I'll copy this and I will paste it, and I'm going to pass the body and the options, and I'm going to return this. Save this. In the book.component.ts, I'm going to call the same service. Before that, we need to create a book object. Up above, I'm going to create a book object. Book is equal to new book, and I'm going to create a method. I'm going to call this add book. This is going to be void. Inside this, I will make use of this variable, which is book service. This dot book service dot add book, which is our service method. To this add book, we will pass the book object that we have created up above, this.book, and I'm going to call subscribe method, subscribe, and we will get the response once we subscribe to that method. I'm going to call this response, and I'm going to print that response in the console.log. I'll print that response, and if we get an error response, I'm going to print that error response in the console. I'm going to call this error. I'm using an arrow functions, and I'm going to print that error response to the console. Save this. In the service class, we have created a method which is addBook, and we are making a HTTP post request. And in the component.ts file, we are creating a one more method which is addBook, and we are calling the service method which is addBook by passing the book object. In the next video, we are going to make use of component.html, and we will create a text boxes, and we will try to add the data from the HTML page. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. In the previous video, we have created a method for post request. In this video, we are going to create a form inside the component.html. So inside the component.html, just above the HTML table, I'm going to create a form. Before that, I need to create a div. Inside the div, I'm going to create a form. Inside the form, I'll create a two text boxes. One is for title and one is for author. We're not going to enter ID because the ID is a primary key and we have given auto incremented in the database. So we're not going to enter the ID. So I'm going to create two text boxes. Enter title, which is a label. Input type is equal to text. And I'm going to use Angular two-way data binding, which is ng model. I'm going to access the book.id, and I'm going to give a name to this text box. I'm going to call this id. I'll put a break, copy this and paste it one more time, and change this to author instead of title, and I'll change this to author. I'm going to change this to title. It's not ID, it's title, and it's author. And I'm going to create a button. The text of this button is add book, and I'm going to use Angular click event, and I'm going to call the add book method, which is in the app.component.ts. Copy this and paste it. Save this. Inside the app.module.ts, we need to import the forms module. So inside the imports, I'm going to import the forms module, and I'm going to import it from the Angular/forms library. Save this, and in the browser you can expect the text boxes. Enter title, enter author. Let's go ahead and enter the title, two states, and the author is Chetan Bhagat, and click add book, and let's navigate to the console, and you can see the response 200, book created with the ID 5. Let's navigate to database and execute the query, and you can see that the book has been added with the ID 5, Chetan Bhagat, 2 states, which means our add is working fine. But as soon as we added the record, we need to reset these text boxes and the table has to be updated. So open the Visual Studio Code. Inside the app.component.ts, I'm going to write a private method. I'm going to call this private. I'm going to call this reset, inside this reset method, I will make use of this book variable, this dot book dot id. I'm going to set null, this dot book dot title is equal to null, this dot book dot author is equal to null. Save this, and I'm going to call this reset method inside the add book. Just after the console.log, I'm going to call the reset method and save this, and go to the browser and reload the web page and add a new record and click add book. The book has been added actually, and our text boxes has been cleared. So if you go to the MySQL database and execute the command, and you can see the record that has been added just now. Now we need to update this table as soon as we enter the record. So go to the Visual Studio. After this reset, I'm going to call the getBooks method. So this will refresh the table. Save this, go to the browser and enter one more record and click add book. The text box has been cleared and the table has been updated. So this is all about adding a new record. So now we are able to add a new record, and we are able to refresh the table, and we are able to reset the text boxes. In the next video, we are going to make use of these edit and delete. We are going to make a put request and a delete request. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In the previous video, we have created a form and we have completed the adding a book to the database. In this video, we're going to look at the delete request. So inside the book.service.ts, I'm going to create a method. I'm going to call this delete book. This will take book ID as an argument. I'm going to call this book ID, which is of type string. Inside this, I will make use of this HTTP service, this dot HTTP service dot, I'm going to call HTTP delete request. Inside this, we will pass the service endpoint. I have already copied the service endpoint. I'll copy this and I'll paste it, and I'm going to append the book ID which is coming from here. Copy this and paste it here, and I'm going to return this. Save this. Inside the book.component.ts, I'm going to create a method. I'm going to call this delete book. To this delete book, I'm going to pass the book ID which is of type string. Inside the delete book, I will make use of this book service, this dot book service. I'm going to call a service method which is delete book, and I'm going to pass the book ID, and I'm going to call a subscribe method. We need to subscribe to this method. I'm going to get the response. I'm going to call this response. I'm going to print that response in the console. Console.log. I'm going to print that response, and we need to refresh the table as soon as the record has been deleted. So I'm going to call getBooks method. This dot getBooks. This is going to refresh the table, and if we get an error response, I'm going to print that error response to the console. I'm going to call this error. Console.log. I'm going to print that error message. Save this. Inside the book.component.html, I'm going to create a button to this delete. The text should be delete. I'm going to use Angular click event. and I'm going to call method which is delete book. To this delete book, I'm going to pass this book ID. Copy this and paste it and save this. Go to the browser, the web page will be reloaded automatically, and now we got the delete button. I'm going to delete these two records. Let's see what will happen. The record has been deleted. You can see console, you can see the response that the book has been deleted, and I'm going to delete this record as well. The record has been deleted. Let's verify in the database. I'm going to run the command, and you can see that the record has been deleted from the database as well. The delete should be working fine. In the next video, we're going to look at the edit operation. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In the previous video, we have discussed about this delete operation. In this video, we're going to do update operation. The update operation is little bit different than the adding a book and deleting a book. We're going to do this in two steps. The first step, we need to convert this edit text into a button. When the user click the update button, we have to get the respective record and we have to pre-populate in these text boxes. For that, we are going to make a HTTP GET request to this service endpoint, which is /API/book/the book ID. This will give us the book object in a JSON format. And once we have done that, in the second step, the user will make a changes and the user will click the add book. This time we have to update the record instead of adding a new record. That is our second step. So let's do it step by step. The first step, we need to convert this text into a button. Let's do that. Go to the book.component.html. I'm going to create a button, update, and I'm going to call Angular onClick event, and I'm going to call a method getBookById. To this method, we will pass the book ID. We have not yet created this method. We are going to create this in a minute. Save this. Inside the book.service.ts, I'm going to create a method. I'm going to call this getBookById, and this will take a book ID as argument. I'm going to call this book ID, which is of type string. This will return an observable which is of type book. Inside this, I will make use of this HTTP service, this.http service.get. To this get method, we will pass the service endpoint. I'm going to copy this and I'll paste it, and I'm going to append the book ID, which is coming from here. On this, I'm going to call a map method. We will get a response. I'm going to call this response, which is of type response, and I will use an arrow function, and I'm going to call JSON method on this response object, response.json. And if something went wrong, we have to handle that exception. So I'm going to call a catch method on this, and I'm going to call up our private method which we have created in one of our previous videos, which is handle error. This dot handle error, and I'm going to return this. Save this. Inside the book.component.ts, I'm going to create a method. I'm going to call this getBookById. I'm going to pass book ID, which is of type string. Inside this, I will make use of the book service object or the book service variable, this dot book service I'm going to call the service method, which is get book by ID. To this I will pass the book ID. On this I'm going to call the subscribe method. We will get the response. I'm going to call this book data. I'm going to assign this book data to this variable, which is book. This dot book is equal to book data, and I'm going to call the get books method to refresh the table. And if we get an error response, I'm going to log that error response to the console. I'm going to call this error. Inside this I will log to the console.log, and I will pass the error object and save this. Go to the browser. This will reload the web page, and now when you click on this update button, you can expect the value should be populating in this text boxes, but it is not. Let's figure out by pressing F12. In the console we are not getting any exception, which means we have made some mistake in the component.html. Let's close this and go to the component.html, and inside this, okay, this is not on click, it is click. Let's save this and go to the browser, and now click the update button. You can see that the values are populating in the text boxes. Let's click one more record. I'm going to click this 2 states. You can see that the values are populating in the text boxes. Now in the second step, if the user make any changes to these records, and when the user click the add book, the record should be updated. It should not create a book. How do we do that? That is coming up in the next video. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. My name is Bhushan. In the previous video, we have created this update button. So now the user click any one of these update button, the respective record should be populated in the text boxes. Now the user make any changes to these records, and when the user click the add book button, we are not going to add the record, instead we are going to update the record. So that is we are going to do in this video. Let's get started. For this updating, we are not going to create any new method. We are going to use the existing method, which is an add book method. But in the book.component.html, we are going to add one more text box to this form, which is a hidden text box, and we're going to set the ID to the text box. So the user click the update button, the book ID should set to the hidden text box. And now when the user click the add book method, it will call the add book method, and the add book method will call the service method. In the service method, we're going to check a condition that if the book ID is available, then we are going to make a put request, which is a updating a record. And if the ID is not there, then we know that we are adding a new record, so we're going to make a post request. So let's do that. Minimize this and go to the book.component.html. Inside the form, I'm going to create a text box, which is a hidden text box. Input type is equal to hidden, name is equal to book.id, and save this. Inside the book.component.ts, we are calling a add book method, which is a service method, and we are passing a book object. So inside the book.service.ts, inside the add book method, I'm going to put a condition. If book ID is there, we're going to make a put request. I'm going to use the HTTP service dot put, and I will pass the service endpoint. I have already copied in the notepad. Copy this and I'll paste it. I'm going to append the book ID, and I'm going to pass the body and options, and I'm going to return this method. If the book ID is not there, then we know that we are adding a new record. I'm going to call a post method. Save this, go to the browser, click any one of these records, and I'm going to change this to Guru. When I click the add book method, the record should be updated. It's not going to add a new record. Let's try to add a new record. Half girlfriend, which is written by Chetan Bhagat. This time the record has been added. So depending upon the book ID, the record is adding and updating. So now we have done with adding a new book, deleting a book, updating a book, and displaying a book. In the next video, we're going to add some CSS property to this application and we will make this application look better. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Hi, welcome back to the full stack development with Angular and Spring MVC. In this video, we're going to add some style to our application. Let's get started. For the styling and all, we are going to use Bootstrap. I have already copied the respective plugins in the notepad. I'm going to copy this and inside the index.html, I'm going to paste it inside the head tag and save this. And inside the browser, you can see the changes. In interest of time, I have already added some styling to this application. I will go ahead and copy that and paste it. Inside the Visual Studio Code, I'll go to the book.component.html. I'll select all and I'll paste it. Save this and go to the browser. You can see the changes. I'm not going to cover the styling and all because it's very easy. You can go ahead and explore by yourself. If you are looking for a source code, under this video in the description section, I have provided a link to the article. You can go ahead and copy the source code. With that being said, we have completed all the operations like creating a book, deleting a book, updating a book, and displaying the records. Let's test this application one last time. We can add a book. The record has been added, and we can update a book. The record has been updated and we can delete a book. This is all about this book management system. With that being said, we are wrapping up this course. If you have any questions about this tutorials, leave your comments in the comment section or head over to my website bhushansirgur.in and you can reach me there in my website.